They tore down their fence with no warning. The HOA caused $5,000 in damages, pure destruction. In the serene, family-friendly neighborhood of Maple Grove, Florida, where palm trees lined the streets and kids played freely in their yards, the Carter family had built a cozy sanctuary. Robert Carter, a 38-year-old software developer, his wife Emily, a 36-year-old yoga instructor, and their two children, 11-year-old Noah and 8-year-old Chloe, had spent months designing their backyard oasis. The centerpiece was a handcrafted wooden fence, 6 feet tall, painted white, and adorned with climbing ivy. Robert had built it himself, spending weekends hammering each plank to create a private space where his kids could play safely, shielded from the busy street nearby. The fence wasn't just a barrier, it was a labor of love, costing $5,000 in materials and countless hours of work. But the Maple Grove Homeowners Association had a problem with the fence. The HOA president, 60-year-old Richard Baxter, a retired contractor with a rigid obsession for uniformity, pointed to a bylaw that stated, "Fences must not exceed 5 feet in height to maintain an open aesthetic in the community." It was a rule rarely enforced. Several neighbors had taller fences without issue. But Richard had received a complaint from a resident who claimed the Carter's fence blocked the view and looked imposing. Richard saw it as his duty to enforce the rule, even though the fence was only 1 foot taller than allowed and blended beautifully with the neighborhood's charm. In October 2024, Richard sent the Carters a letter citing the bylaw and demanding that they lower the fence to 5 feet within 48 hours or face a $1,500 fine for non-compliant structure. The letter also warned that failure to comply would result in corrective action by the HOA. Robert was stunned. The fence had been up for over a year without any complaints, and lowering it would ruin its design and expose their yard to the street. He called Richard, explaining that the extra height was for his kids' safety and offered to apply for a variance to keep the fence as is. He even invited Richard to see how unobtrusive it was. But Richard was unyielding. 5 feet is the rule, he barked. Fix it or we will. Robert planned to file for the variance the next day, hoping to resolve the issue peacefully. He never got the chance. On a sunny Wednesday morning, while Robert was at work, Emily was teaching a yoga class, and the kids were at school. A crew of HOA contracted workers arrived at the Carters' property with chainsaws and crowbars. Without warning, they began tearing down the fence, sawing through the wooden planks and ripping out the posts with brutal efficiency. The climbing ivy was shredded, the white paint chipped and scattered across the lawn, and within an hour, the entire fence was reduced to a pile of debris. The workers loaded the remains into a truck and left, leaving the Carters' backyard exposed to the street. Taped to the front door was a notice, a $1,500 fine for the non-compliant fence, plus a $500 demolition fee, signed by Richard Baxter. Emily returned home first, her heart sinking as she saw the destruction. The backyard, once a safe haven for her kids, was now open to the street, with cars whizzing by just feet away. She called Robert, her voice trembling. "They tore it down, Rob. Our fence is gone." Robert rushed home, his face pale as he surveyed the wreckage, splinters of wood, torn ivy, and the exposed yard. Noah and Chloe got home shortly after, their eyes wide with shock. "Where's our fort?" Chloe asked, referring to the play area they'd built near the fence. Robert filmed the scene, capturing the pile of debris and the fine notice, and posted it on X with the caption, "The HOA destroyed our $5,000 fence with no warning." Fence takedown. The video went viral, gaining 7 million views in 48 hours, with the hashtag trending nationwide. People were appalled, calling the HOA's actions vandalism and heartless. Local news stations in Miami covered the story, interviewing a devastated Emily, who said, "That fence kept my kids safe. Now it's gone." The reporter also spoke to a contractor who estimated the damage at $5,000, confirming the Carters' loss. The community rallied behind the Carters. A neighbor, 32-year-old graphic designer Mia Lopez, organized a protest outside the HOA office, where dozens of residents gathered with signs reading, "Fences aren't crimes," and "Stop HOA vandalism." Some brought pieces of wood, laying them at the office door as a symbolic gesture for the Carters' destroyed fence. A GoFundMe page to help the Carters rebuild raised $9,000 in a week, with donors leaving messages like HOAs are bullies and justice for the Carters. The story caught national attention, with outlets like CBS and the Miami Herald running headlines like HOA demolishes family's fence, causes $5,000 in damage, and Florida family fights HOA after fence destruction. The Carters decided to sue the HOA, hoping to hold Richard accountable and recover their losses. They hired a lawyer, Amanda Reed, who argued that the HOA's actions constituted vandalism and intentional infliction of emotional distress, and that the fence height rule was arbitrarily enforced, as other taller fences were ignored. The lawsuit sought $10,000 in damages, the removal of the fine, and an injunction to prevent further HOA interference. The case drew a crowd to the courtroom, with supporters wearing white ribbons to honor the Carters' fence. Amanda presented Robert's video as evidence, along with contractor estimates valuing the damage at $5,000. Robert took the stand, his voice steady but emotional. "I built that fence for my kids. They took it away without even a warning." Richard, representing the HOA, showed no remorse. He claimed the fence height rule was meant to preserve the community's aesthetic and that the Carters' non-compliance justified the demolition. He produced the bylaw and argued that the HOA had the right to enforce its rules, even with direct action. The judge, a firm believer in HOA authority, ruled in favor of the HOA, stating that the bylaw was legally binding and the Carters had been warned. The fine was upheld, and the Carters were ordered to pay the HOA's legal fees, an additional $4,000 burden. Robert and Emily left the courtroom in silence, holding their kids' hands as they faced the reality of their loss. The ruling sparked outrage online, with number fence takedown trending again, this time with calls for HOA reform. Home improvement experts and privacy advocates condemned the decision, arguing that it violated basic property rights. In Maple Grove, Richard remained HOA president, issuing new rules lowering the fence height limit to 4 feet and requiring HOA approval for any new fences, with fines doubled to $3,000. The Carters used the GoFundMe money to clean up their yard, but they couldn't afford to rebuild the fence, leaving their backyard exposed. Noah and Chloe stopped playing outside, afraid of the busy street, and the once welcoming neighborhood became a place of resentment. Maple Grove, once a peaceful retreat, turned into a battleground, with residents wondering what the HOA would destroy next.